Dawson's Rambles.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Writer here. Welcome to my video where I talk about everything I loved about Mighty Morphin Power Rangers once and always. Obviously, I've already done a full review, so if you're interested in my overly thorough thoughts, that will be linked here multiple times. This is primarily just, as the video says, a list of my favorite things. There will be a couple small follow-ups to bits in the review that I didn't notice, and this is primarily going to go in order as I just rewatched the episode and took notes as I went, but I will bounce around a couple times when I have similar points about similar scenes. But without further ado, let's get started. Overall, I really enjoyed the opening scene. I think it kind of showed the tone mix we're going to have here, which is going to be a little bit more mature, a little bit cinematic, with some really nice cinematic scenes, especially with them overlooking the cliff, but also with a nice dose of nostalgia when all the Rangers run in and the guitar riff and the theme kicks in. It's really well done, and I think just sets the overall tone and stage for this special. You know, and despite the fact that you have the tube necks and the mismatched pink helmet, I still really like the way the suits look in this. It's really nice to see some HD mmpr action. Something I didn't even really think about the first time watching was it's kind of cool to see the Rangers actually fight Rita, because they never actually did hand-to-hand combat with her. And speaking of the fights, there's some pretty cool choreography all throughout this. It's not always consistent, but there's definitely some standout memorable moments, like Billy flipping over Rita, some of the action in the final battle, some really good memorable stunt moments, kind of reminding me of Dino Fury. So I really like Robot Rita. Her design's actually pretty cool and menacing. I think this is Barbara Goodson's finest performance, because she actually sounds scary and menacing. Not that the voice was ever bad or anything, but they turned her into such a comedic character in the original series, I stopped taking her seriously, to the point when I read the comics it's a totally different voice in my head. But this was an actual scary, menacing Rita that had a very mean spirit all throughout the special. I really enjoyed Robot Rita a lot. I also really loved Robot Rita's origins. There was lots of speculation going in about how she would be created or not, and this was honestly the coolest thing that could have happened in my opinion. Maybe not the coolest thing, I'm sure there's other things, but it was pretty awesome. The idea of Rita's pure evil essence that was burned off during Countdown to Destruction possessing Alpha 8, that's awesome. I mentioned this in the review too, but I like that the score is a really nice mix of some nostalgic beats, or some reworking of some nostalgic beats, with some actual kind of modern day epic sounding score. I like that they didn't just solely lean on going full 90s, and hearing some more modern takes on a score was actually really nice and a welcome surprise. I love everything about the scene between Billy and Zach when they're about to tell Minh what happened. It's just such a great scene that gives me kind of a glimpse into what a Cobra Kai-esque Power Rangers show could be. It felt like a more mature, updated show, and it really showcased one of my favorite things about this special, which was I feel that David Yost and Walter Jones slid into their roles perfectly, but not just that, but they felt like updated versions of the characters, and I really loved all of the civilian scenes, like I called them in my review. And this was just such a well done scene. I really like the transition of when we first see the house, it says Quan on the mailbox, and then Quan Taylor, which directly addresses the question that's posed of who's going to take care of her. It was a nice kind of like heartwarming transition. Speaking of, I really like the dynamic between Minh and Zach in this whole thing. I think it works really well. I really feel the warmth of their bond. I think that Zach does a really great job at being her guardian, and I think Walter did a good job selling his role as this more mature version that cares about Minh, and all of their scenes were really well done. I also really like the time skip, just because I feel it makes the plot feel more natural. This could have easily felt like a really rushed thing, where Trini gets killed at the beginning of the episode, and then the end of the episode all takes place within a weekend. So I like that Minh had been training herself, and it kind of sets up for why she would be a little bit more competent. Although obviously you don't always have to be a competent fighter to become a Ranger at the beginning, as Billy shows as he grows over the series. As I mentioned in my review, I like that she trains and they acknowledge that she's using Trini's style. It was a nice touch and callback and another way of honoring her. I liked all the little updates on the characters we got throughout it, like sliding in the mention about Zach being a congressman, just showing that Rocky was holding a fireman's helmet. We didn't get super detailed updates on everybody, but there were subtle little ways of letting us know what everyone was up to, which is something I'm always curious about when veteran Rangers return, and we don't always get that. During some of the fight scenes with the Rangers that weren't there, I like the use of either past audio or voice actors to make them sound like Tommy and Kim. Jason not so much in one of the scenes, but overall I think they did a pretty decent job, at least sort of trying to fool you into thinking someone was in there, and it didn't feel so much like just a soulless suit. Robot designs for Snizzard or whatever, and the Minotaur guy look great. Honestly, they're pretty badass looking, and usually I'm not a Monster of the Week guy, but I would totally pick up their Lightning Collection figures. Couple small touches from the graveyard fight. The music in this scene was one of my favorites. Like, there's definitely several guitar riffs throughout the episode, but this one was my favorite rewatching, that it felt like a really good modern update that evoked the original but felt like truly a modern version of it. I also liked little touches like Zach calling Jason Jace, which he did all kinds of times in the original series, and it just felt like a nostalgic little moment that you would only remember if you'd seen mmpr a million times. Also, something I didn't think about the first time is this is the first time we've heard Power Down in a long time. was actually really nice. It was kind of a staple of the franchise and we haven't heard it in a while. I personally also liked Let's Ranger Up, and wouldn't mind hearing that back again. I liked the inclusion of the second rad bug in this. It was like fan service, obviously, but it made sense within the context of the plot because of Billy's, Cranston Industries and everything. It was a nice overall addition to the story. Also a nice touch on Trini's grave. It says friend to all, which I thought was just really fitting for her character, and probably the actress as well. Now, something I want to address here for my likes is a lot of people are giving criticism to Zach and Billy as well, talking about how they don't want Trini involved because she's a teenager, and how it's obviously hypocritical because the whole show started with teenagers with attitude becoming Rangers, and they even address it multiple times. And that's funny to point out, but it's totally understandable here. They just lost their friend to this similar situation. Minh is under his care. He obviously doesn't want the same thing to happen to her and to let Trini down. He even mentions that this is the first time they've had to deal with something like this. This is the first time one of their Rangers has fallen. Not to mention coming at it from a different point of view as a parent, obviously you're going to have those feelings. He probably realizes what he's saying is hypocritical, but where he's coming from emotionally absolutely makes sense in my opinion. And also, he obviously comes around at the end and she becomes a Ranger. I love everything about Billy's just involvement in this and where he's grown as a character with Cranston Tech, the Command Center 2.0, the idea of this secret command center being underneath the main company and all that. It really feels like he's the successor to Zordon, but better. Taking this role, obviously establishing a Ranger network, being able to restore and create powers and Zords. It's really cool, as people often think of it being Jason or Tommy that would take on a similar role, but this makes absolute sense because of Billy's role in the series, as his growth throughout the series had him being more involved with the sort of, technical side of the command center helping, and, working with Zords and tech all throughout the series. It's the perfect way to do it, and I really love it. I also think Alpha 9's suit looks really great. I was disappointed they didn't just make it Alpha 5, but it makes sense within the plot, and it also explains why he's taller. I also liked his line about, it must be difficult raising a teenager with attitude. It's a fun little nod to the original premise that works well within the dialogue. As a side note, I already talked about Rita's origins, but this came up in my notes again, and even though they obviously wouldn't address it, I do find it funny that it's technically Andros and the Space Rangers that helped cause Zordon's Z-Wave, and yet she's after the MMPR team. I know obviously it makes more sense here, but I just can't help but think of Andros not having a care in the world in space while all this is going on. Speaking of, I actually really liked that the special allowed us to address the original team dealing with Zordon's death. It's primarily Billy, but that was something I always wondered about since they had the most experience with Zordon, and the space team was there for the finale, and they never even met Zordon. I mean, obviously Andros did, but the Turbo team, dealt with Demetria. And so I was always disappointed that there wasn't that emotional weight in the finale, and I like that we actually got to address that here. As mentioned in the review, I really enjoyed Rocky in this. He seemed really awkward in the trailers, but he was really enjoyable, and he wasn't perfect, but he had many lines like, complaining about his lunch that felt classic Rocky, and I just overall enjoyed him, and it felt more nostalgic seeing him on screen than his last appearance. Like, it felt more like he was Rocky, and I just really enjoyed that. And he actually made me chuckle with that whole bit about, I just want my lunch! It's relatable. I didn't notice this the first time, but a nice connection with the Buzz Blast reporter reporting on the Angel Grove attack after setting up that there was going to be an Angel Grove branch in Dino Fury. Nice little connection that you're going to notice if you're an overall fan, but it doesn't get in the way if you're just a casual. I like that they actually took the time to explain everything around the Dino powers. Obviously, we don't get every answer in the world, but just the fact that Billy can produce these coins just kind of gives you a blanket answer that he's possibly responsible for the powers returning in the past, and also the reasoning of them wanting to use the Dino Megazord makes sense for why we get to see the Terra coin and the Tyranno coin given to Rocky in this situation. And overall, I think there was a really nice attention to detail in this special. Again, they didn't answer every question, but I didn't expect it to, because this is meant to appeal to casuals. They're going to be confused if we're all of a sudden addressing the events of well, how does this work with Time Force? And I think they did a good job, and it was clear from many of the bits of dialogue throughout this that they did their homework and even brought in some consultants to try to make sense of the crazy continuity that is the main PR universe. Especially stuff like, little callbacks like the pink energy is dangerous callback, all that kind of stuff. It was really appreciated. Even though it doesn't look the greatest to me, I am glad we got a new morphing sequence, and the throwback was kind of fun. And it's just such a nerdy detail that I was actually really excited to hear Pterodactyl, since she never did in the show, since she was the only second wave mmpr Ranger to not use the original coins. I got a good chuckle out of Kat's angry turkeys line when referencing how the putties sound. So I just want to say that even though this was obviously done for reasons that they couldn't get Jason and Kimberly back, I really do like the lineup we have here. It showcases how unique MMPR was having all these cast changes through the years, and even though they don't take as much advantage of Rocky and Kat and focus more on season 1, it's cool that this is a way of overall honoring all 3 seasons, and I really like that. So even though they're only here shortly, I really appreciate the General Zod. Adam was here, as well as Aisha. It was cool that they brought them back as, again, a way to honor the legacy of the series, possibly setting them up for something more, and also tying them to SPD lore and expanding it. though it wasn't fully explained, was also a nice touch. I mentioned this multiple times in multiple videos, but I love the juice bar set. It was absolutely the most nostalgic and well created, and I think it's kind of the most nostalgic and warm set from the original series, so I was really happy that they included it here. I like that they also even mention it feeling smaller because they've grown up, which I think is both a reference to the fact that the set is a little bit smaller than the original, and that is something that actually happens to people in real life. If you visit places from your childhood, it might actually seem smaller. Love the hip-hop keto scene. I feel like it had to be done. It was a lot of fun. I also really enjoyed Minh calling it out. This is just random because it's in my notes when it came up, but I loved the line when Alpha said, "Definitely detecting a vibe." I didn't catch this the first time, which is something I wanted to address from my review, but when Zach was telling Minh Billy's motivations to make her understand and be less angry about him, he mentions that Zordon was a father figure, which I think makes her understand because she just lost a parent and obviously would sympathize with someone wanting to bring back a parent. I didn't catch that because there was so much going on the first time, but that's a nice detail that makes Minh's story overall better for me. I really liked the detail of Rita bringing up the Together Rangers or More in reference to the 2017 movie, which is one of my favorite Power Rangers stories. Even though I have mixed thoughts on the way Minh's journey was handled at this point, her energy in the rescue scene with the Rad Bug was a lot of fun. I also really liked the line of the two Robo Monsters saying, "We work for an intergalactic war criminal." That was just funny. In the scene where Trini is protected by the Morpher, I like the idea that it actually is a little bit of Trini's spirit that exists in the grid doing it, because obviously it gets rid of some logic problems with the fact that Trini didn't survive when she was full morphed, and Minh just had a Morpher, but also I can't believe I didn't think about it the first time I watched it. I thought that was, if that's the idea, I think it's really cool. Plus, I really liked the flashes she got from her mom's memories from the morphing grid. It was well done, meaningful, and the score was perfect. Something that a lot of people wanted to see that I was sort of indifferent to, but I also I did like seeing the power weapons actually used in the fight, and they were made great use of during the final battle. Speaking of, Billy stabbing Rita in the back was badass and awesome. The Zords have yielded some mixed opinions, for myself included, but I do really like the way that they replicated the introduction scene that we usually would get when the Zords were introduced in the 90s. It was very nostalgic. The arms are a little wonky, but overall I do like the look of the Megazord when it does, look right. If that makes any sense. I also really like the interior cockpit. I think it was kind of a good job of, kind of echoing the original, but being something new, and I also liked seeing Billy take center stage. The time travel plot idea is cliche, but overall was pretty fun, and I like that the original dialogue of Rita being awoken was glitching out and playing as she was being killed. That sounds morbid the way I said it, but it was just kind of a cool thing to hear, after 10,000 years I'm free, and it just kind of glitches out and then Rita's destroyed. At the end, I love little mentions of places like Aquitar and Cestria. I think, setting up and stuff for the future, and obviously maybe setting up that Billy's still with her, but again, just showing that there was attention to detail about the lore. Also, they mentioned Miranoi later, which was great for me, because I was always disappointed that that's never been mentioned as a huge lore beat for the overall Power Rangers universe, that we found a second Earth, basically. I also like the idea that Billy intergalactically travels around helping people. I think that's another really cool beat for his character. I also really like this moment with Aisha and Minh, which I didn't get to mention in my review, where she says, the saber-tooth coin is in right hands, acknowledging the legacy of both characters, and then Minh, of course, says, "Yes, today, it's an honor." No, she didn't say it like that. I just wanted to talk about screen. Overall, the final scene at the juice bar is great. It felt like a classic homage to the original scenes with a lot of meaning to it. After rewatching it, especially after the scene where I understood the parental motivation, her reconnecting with Billy here felt a lot better, and I really enjoyed this scene. I also like them reminiscing about Trini, as it felt like they were both simultaneously talking about Trini and the actress at the same time. When she talked about how much they all meant to Trini, again, I felt like it was talking about both real life and the show, which is obvious, but I feel like I could just feel it in that scene, and I really liked it. And also, I really liked them sharing wacky past adventures from the show. And lastly, as I mentioned in the review, I think the last tribute was great, honoring both the actors that we unfortunately lost. And I think the scene they chose was kind of perfect, because it had all 6 originals together, and it really lingered on both yellow and green, obviously giving you that kind of real emotional moment. And that's everything I liked about this special. Honestly, it wasn't perfect, but I enjoyed the hell out of it, and I enjoyed it even more the second time. I'll probably be going for thirds this weekend, but let me know what your favorite things about the special were in the comments, and I'm gonna go because we made this under 20 minutes, guys. We did it! High five. Sorry I ended the video like that. But until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.